Okay, great. Let's get started. Good morning, everyone. Once again, Ian Andrews here with LakewoodAlive. We're really glad that you're here with us today to learn about the Shared Work program. We have a great partner in Claudia Dillinger at the City of Lakewood to walk us through what the program is, how it's been implemented. And while I realize the target audience today are small businesses, I think there's a lot that we can learn from Claudia's experience. She's been very helpful in walking us through the process. As businesses are considering trying to leverage a really important program. I'm also joined by my colleague, Allison Urbanik. Allison is our Housing and Internal Operations Director and is always just so helpful with these webinars. So it's fun to be able to tag team these with her. So Allison, thank you for your help. Folks, if you have questions, please feel free to type them into the little thought bubble. We'll take questions throughout. And Claudia said she's happy to answer them as we go, so we don't have to wait until the end. So please, if you have questions, please do that. Also want to thank one of our friends from the Ohio Department of Job and Family Services who is joining us as an attendee, and he will be able to kind of take down some notes, and if there is some follow-up, we do have a point of contact now, which is great. So we'll be able to get a couple things addressed if there are some questions. So let's get started. So we'll run through some of the programming that we have administered. We'll meet Claudia, and then we'll jump into the presentation. Our mission is to foster and sustain vibrant neighborhoods. We do that by ensuring that everybody lives in healthy and safe housing, by putting on large quality of life events, which this year we really can't do, but we're doing it virtually to reinforce why Lakewood's such a great community to live and work and visit. And then supporting small businesses, ensuring that we have vibrant commercial corridors through streetscaping, public art, but most importantly, being able to work with our small business friends to connect them to resources and ensure that they're able to be successful during COVID-19 pandemic. The partnership could not be stronger between the City of Lakewood, LakewoodAlive, and the Chamber of Commerce as we've tried to address a myriad of issues that are affecting not just the business, but the business owner and then the employees and how it trickles down to their rent. And there's just so many things involved in the whole dynamic. This is our 10th webinar. We've hosted 9 prior to, had never done one before the beginning of April. Now we're on number 10, working with the city on the rent relief program. We're excited about being able to partner with the next business assistance program, which will be launched in the coming weeks from CARES Act funding from the federal government. The City of Lakewood did receive, being able to help folks access financial programs and resources, particularly through institutions like First Federal Lakewood, working with the mayor on her small business task force, continuing to keep our merchants connected and coordinating those groups so they can not only maintain the relationships, but also lean on each other and learn from each other as to what's working during a really tough time. Navigating through PPP, the EIDL loan process and unemployment, and then working with our public officials, along with some community solidarity initiatives that have been really fun to keep people engaged. So today we're joined by Claudia Dillinger, the Human Resources Director for the City of Lakewood. Claudia, if you like, go ahead and you're unmuted, so that's great. If you wouldn't mind just introducing yourself and maybe saying a few words.
Hi, well, first, Ian and LakewoodAlive, thank you for having me. I'm glad to be able to help your organization and the small businesses in Lakewood. I'm the HR Director with the City of Lakewood. I was hired back in April. I previously worked for the City of Elyria and the City of Macedonia, and I started my career with the City of Athens, Ohio. I am an OU Bobcat. I have a lot of municipal experience, but today, my topic of talking about shared work, it's something we started here with the City of Lakewood to help our employees continue to receive some full paycheck, and then but also save the City of Lakewood some money due to the economic situation that many of us are experiencing. So I'm happy to go over this topic, and like Ian said, as questions come up, I would prefer this to be more conversational than anything. So feel free to ask them, and I will do my best to answer them. I'm speaking on just experience. I'm by no means a professional on this topic. So I'm just here to kind of help share what we've learned through the process and hopefully give you some tips to make it easier for you.
That's great, Claudia. Thank you. And let's just transition into your PowerPoint. I'm going to going between a couple screens here, so excuse any potential clunkiness. And here we go. As you would like for me to advance a slide, please just let me know and I'll advance for you. So go right ahead, Claudia.
Okay, so just to start on here, I refer to it as SWAP. I think it's a little easier of an acronym to spit out. You'll notice in the documents that is from the Department of Job and Family Services, they just call it SharedWork Ohio, so it's just the SWO. So just know I added the P. It was easier for us to kind of call it that opposed to just SWO. So next slide, please. So this is just a general statement of what it is. So SWAP, it's a voluntarily reduced work schedule to avoid layoffs. So the idea of it is instead of laying employees off or even reducing hours and them not being paid, they're going to receive a percentage of payment from unemployment if you reduce their schedule anywhere from 10% to 50% per week. So it also is a maximum of 40 hours per week. So if you have employees that work 50 hours a week, it's only going to consider a schedule up to 40 hours. So you want to keep that in mind. And then they receive a prorated compensation from unemployment, and I'll go over that a little bit on the next slide. So first, here's a few advantages to doing participating in the SWAP program. It obviously allows you to retain your skilled and trained workforce, so you don't have to try and find new employees, you don't have to train new employees, especially in right now, we don't have, most of us don't have the extra finances to be able to invest in new employees. So to be able to retain and keep staff that are already trained would be very helpful. And then it also allows your employees to stay with you. They're not going out dealing with the stress of finding different employment or being unemployed, and they still can receive some sort of payment for those hours they aren't working. So who is eligible to participate, or what are the requirements to participate in SWAP? So you have to reduce an affected unit's hours to avoid the layoffs, and I will go over what a unit is later in this program. And that's what unemployment, the Department of Job and Family Services refers to it. You have to be registered with Ohio's unemployment insurance program. So if you have paid unemployment for previous employees at any point, you are already participating. You have to know your account number, and that would come on any of the forms you would have received from unemployment. And you have to have access to the benefits, the online benefit system. If you don't have access, I will go over later in the slide how to gain that. You have to be up to date on all payments for penalties, reimbursements, interest. So if you're up to date on any payments you've had to make to unemployment, you'll be eligible. Any information that's requested from them. So when you're basically submitting your application for the SWAP program, you would need to submit any information that's requested of you, and then you have to pay your employees hourly. So if for any reason someone would be salaried, you just need to convert that to an hourly payment. So that way, when you're submitting their reduced hours, they make up for the 20% they would be reduced. They're receiving payment for that on an hourly basis, not at a salary. Next slide.
Claudia,
yes.
We have a question.
Okay.
And you might be getting to this, so you can definitely put me on hold if you need to. But could you please talk about the eligibility for employees who have a second income outside of the business participating in SWOP, SWAP? Is there a difference in... Is there a difference in eligibility if the second income is earned from a business in another state?
So I will be getting to that either the next slide or in a few.
Okay, great. Thank you.
You're welcome. Next slide, please. Okay, so yes, I'm going to get to it on this slide. So for an employee to qualify, or the requirements for an employee, they have to be employed year-round, full-time or part-time with the SWAP employer. So they have to work 20 hours. It doesn't necessarily have to be they have to work year round with the employee. They don't have to necessarily work the whole previous year. They have to have worked 20 weeks of that prior year. So let's say we started someone today, they would have to have worked 20 weeks prior with any employer that is part of the UI benefits. So when that employee submits their unemployment claim, they're going to look at their history to know if they're eligible or not. They have to be available for work for their normal weekly hours. So if you have basic full-time employees that work 8 to 5, they can't be, for example, like on a workers' comp claim, like if they're not eligible to be, or if they're not available to be working due to some sort of disability, or they're out on injury, they would not be eligible. They have to meet certain eligibility requirements for unemployment benefits. Again, that goes back to the previous 20, they've worked for 20 weeks, and there may be a few other items that qualify there. And then they also are, so as the employer, you submit an application saying, okay, these employees are participating in the SWAP program, then those individual employees are also going to file for unemployment through the website. Employees are not eligible if they're seasonal employees. So this usually comes into play, like anyone, for us, example, like lifeguards, they would not be eligible because they only work for certain months of us. Students hired for an internship, or anyone who's been disqualified from receiving unemployments in the past, currently, like if they had applied, 2 weeks ago for unemployment and were considered disqualified, they're not going to be eligible now. And there's more details within the pamphlet I'll go over later that has those details. And then again, from Allison's question, secondary employment. So when an employee goes to file their unemployment, it is going to ask if they have a second employer, and they have to submit that information. If an employee, let's say they're going to take a 20% reduction from you throughout the week. If they are going to work those hours for a secondary employer and receive compensation, that's going to reduce or disqualify them for that week. It doesn't disqualify them from applying or being eligible for unemployment if they don't work every week. So let's say someone has a lawn business where they mow people's lawns and it's an LLC. If they work that week and are going to mow lawns and are going to have to submit that, yes, I worked this many hours and I made this much money, then they wouldn't be eligible that week. But let's say the next week they don't mow any lawns, they don't actually work. They would be eligible that week because they didn't have any hours for that secondary employer. They didn't actually make any money. So it doesn't disqualify them total. And I don't quote me on this, but I believe it's any employment regardless of what state it's in, because they have to submit that information when they apply. So Allison, to answer your question, I don't want to say confidently that it is if they work in another state, but I'm pretty sure that if there's any secondary employment at all, that counts towards them possibly being ineligible for receiving any of the benefits.
Hey, Claudia.
Great, thank you so much.
This is Ian. I do have a question. So if you need 20 weeks of employment with the company, how does it work for retail and restaurants where you have higher turnover? If you have been with the business for 15 weeks, does that mean you would not qualify, or you would have to wait for 5 more weeks of work to be able to qualify? How would that work?
So it's not 20 weeks with that employer. It's 20 weeks prior. So okay, let's say it was a college student who just graduated and got their first job. They wouldn't be eligible because they have no work history. If it's someone who worked for a different employer who was also paying unemployment insurance and was an unemployment employer, they would be eligible because they had that previous 20 weeks working with any employer. It doesn't have to be with their current employer.
Understood. Thank you.
You're welcome.
And to add on to that question, Claudia, so if that person was working 20 weeks, let's say they worked with us for 5 weeks and someone else for 15 weeks, would their compensation be based on their previous employment or our employment? So that additional compensation to make up for the lost hours? Correct.
So from what I would guess, because so I'm participating as an employee for the City of Lakewood. And I actually received, you know, the employees receive like, okay, you're eligible and here's where your compensation's coming from. Mine is actually 100% going back to the city of Elyria, my previous employer. So they're actually responsible for paying my unemployment because that's where I spent, I would assume, most of my year was with them. Now, if they have multiple employers or have worked for multiple employers in the past, the unemployment breaks that down into the percentages per employer of who's responsible for paying that. So it is, and then I would also guess that they're basing it off of what you would have made under your last tax filing, because I, as an employee, don't submit my wages when I file my claim. And I can tell you, as the person at the employer responsible for submitting the information, I'm also not submitting wage information for my employees. So where unemployment gets that number, I'm not 100% confident, but it has to be something based on either the way employees file their taxes or when they're reaching out. I don't know where that number comes from, but they base it off of, I would imagine, how you filed your taxes through the state would be my guess.
Got it. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. That's all I have for this slide. Yep. Okay. So this goes back to kind of what I started talking about earlier on when you reduce your employee's work schedule, what does that mean? How are they compensated? So if you have a basic full-time employee that works 40 hours, they take a 20% reduction. So they're taking a shift off. They're taking 8 hours off per day. They are going to receive 20% of what they would have made in that day. So just as a simple calculation, if an employee makes $100 a day, they're going to receive $20 through shared work for missing that day. Now, again, it may be higher, it might be lower, but that's the concept of how the employees are compensated through the shared work program. Now, the employees, which I didn't put in this PowerPoint because it ends this Friday, but if you're familiar, the CARES Act currently is giving anyone through unemployment an additional $600 a week. Those who participated in the SharedWork Ohio program were also eligible, because that when they introduced the CARES Act, they got it out so quickly, which was great because they were helping people and all these organizations, but they didn't have any stipulations. It didn't say, well, if you partially work or work, it just said, if you claim unemployment, you receive the $600. So employees participating in the shared work are not only getting the state unemployment, so in this example, the $20, but they were also receiving the $600 per week. Now that is set to expire on the 25th, which is the Saturday. But there is talk that that's going to be continued, possibly at a lesser amount. Congress has not voted on that yet, so that is to be determined. But if that were the case, it is a slight benefit to those employees who participate, because most will make out in the end and have a little extra in their pocket, opposed to being to losing money. So it's a way to incentivize employees, if that's the case, and to have them participate in the program. So it's just something to keep in mind. If it gets extended, even at a lesser amount than 600, there's a good chance employees could be made whole. So keep that in mind. So the employer, in order for you to apply for the program, you must have a minimum of 2 participating employees. So it could be the owner and 1 employee, or two employees, or all your staff. When you submit, you have to submit a template, a participant template. It's a very easy Excel document that allows you to fill in the name, social security number, and then they're normally weekly hours. So remember, it's based on a percentage. So let's say you have a full-time employee that works 40 hours, but a part-time employee that works 20 hours. They could technically be in the same unit. At 20%, you would just have the full-time take a reduction of 8 hours and the part-timer take a reduction of 4 hours. So you can have multiple applications as well. So if you wanted to have someone who takes 10%, that only takes 4 hours on a full schedule, but still have the part-timer take 4 hours, You could technically have multiple applications as long as there's 2 people participating per application. Estimate the number of employees who would have been laid off by participating in SWAP. So, you know, let's say by having everyone furlough, you are no longer going to have to lay off 3 employees. That's just a number that you have to best guesstimate, and usually through your savings through the furlough compared to, you know, reducing a salary. That's how you can kind of look at it. Describe how the program will be implemented. Again, this is very brief. They're looking for a few sentences that just says, you know, we're putting this information out to our employees. We've told them ahead of time the benefits, why we're doing this. I also have an example that I'll show you at the end of the PowerPoint of what we sent out to our staff to kind of introduce the program and ask them to participate. And then again, at the end, provide a plan notifying employees of an advanced work reduction or explanation. So that's kind of all included in the PDF we sent to our staff. Next slide. This goes over what is considered an affected unit. So an affected unit consists of 2 employees who perform either similar work. So if you're a restaurant and you have 2 employees who are considered servers, they could be included. But it can also be employees who do different work, but their jobs would affect one another, can be included. So let's say, you know, technically maybe you have a server, but you have a hostess or a bartender. You could technically lump them all together in the same unit. If regardless of what they do, they would all be laid off or be considered for layoff. And then, like I mentioned earlier, I got a little ahead of myself, you can establish multiple SWAP applications, but the reduction percentage within the application just has to be the same. Next slide. So this is how the employer will go about actually applying. You have to submit the application online. And again, if you don't have an online account, you can call the number I have at the bottom of this slide and they can help you with it. I recommend you call when you have maybe an hour, hopefully maybe not 2. Unemployment has been experiencing very high call volumes. I've been on hold multiple times. So it can take a little while to get through. And then they could set you up with your online account. It says that, you know, in their pamphlet, their brochure, because this program has been around for years. It was not something that was just established due to the COVID pandemic. It's something that's been in place many, many years. So their brochure, their pamphlet is very general. It does not speak to the specific situation. It says that approving or denying will happen within 30 days of receipt. I have a double asterisk because in what I have noticed, I'm getting responses within 2 days approving our applications. So know that they are expediting things, knowing employers are trying to take advantage of this program and implement it as quick as possible. And then also know that unemployment runs on a Sunday to Saturday schedule. So when you're approved, you're going to get approved for the Sunday following your application date, and then it'll expire in 52 weeks on that Saturday. So your application is technically good for a year. Employees are eligible for 26 weeks of that year. So you don't have to have your employees take a furlough every week either. If let's say 1 week, you're like, okay, work is slow, we could have you furlough this week, you know work's gonna pick up the next week, you don't have to furlough them that week. They could skip that week and then take a furlough the following week. So you can really manage the furloughs on a week-to-week basis. And just keep in mind, even if you pay your employees monthly, bi-monthly, bi-weekly, unemployment looks at everything on a weekly schedule. So employees will, through unemployment, receive compensation weekly once their claim is approved, regardless of how you pay your employees.
Hey, Claudia.
So I was just,
Go ahead, Allison.
I was just going to say, and that this program seems really, really helpful to employers because of the flexibility. You know, it's nice to know that you don't have to take it for a certain period of time. You know, it's nice that it can ebb and flow with the workflow that you have coming through, depending on what your, you know, industry is. That's really great that it's so flexible and, you know, seems to be accommodating right now, especially with COVID. So I was just going to applaud Ohio and SharedWork Ohio for being so forthright in thinking about this program.
And even just a comment on that, it's based on employees. So you could have some employees furlough this week, and you could have some employees furlough the next week, and then it's not all or nothing either. So it's the employees really tracking their own 26 weeks within the 52-week period. I mean, you're tracking it as the employer because you're submitting the claim data, but realistically, you could have an employee's 26 weeks. They could all vary. So you could even have some employees who use it now, and then in the second half of the year, they could continue, or new employees could take advantage as well. So it's not all or nothing, and it can vary employee to employee based on their schedule.
Hey, Claudia, and maybe you're going to get to this, but if the plans become effective on Sunday, following the date they're approved, what happens on Sundays? Or are you going to get to that a little bit later?
You know what? I'm not sure if I am going to, so I will answer. So the employer, so opposed to when an employee files for unemployment, they're responsible for filing their own claims. What the employer has to do is each Sunday, it doesn't have to be on Sunday, it's what we've been doing because our employees get anxious to file. And the earlier you file in the week, the faster you do receive your claim money. So an employer on Sunday, so what I do is when my kids wake me up at 7 a.m., I jump on the computer and I submit an Excel document. And I basically have it pre-filled out. So all I have to do is upload and submit it. And it's basically verifying, okay, our employees in this group were reduced 20%, which has been mostly full-time for us. So we have our 40-hour employees actually working a 32-hour schedule. I'm verifying that is what they worked, and I'm uploading it. Your employees will then get an email that says, your employer submitted your claim, please log in and verify. And your employees then log in and they verify that, yes, those 32 or 40 hours is correct, and then they receive their payment. I will say there are some employees who, if they've had unemployment claims in the past or they do work a second employer, their claims have been held up slightly, but it is retro back. So let's say it takes 3 weeks for them to be approved for whatever their reason might be. They are getting that money for the previous 3 weeks. It just takes a little while to go through. I fortunately did not have that issue, and I have been receiving my money by Tuesday of each week. So we do have a lot of employees who are getting, if I file on Sunday, I've been getting my money by Tuesday. So unemployment is doing the best they can to get that money to the employees as quickly as possible. There has been a few hangups at the very beginning when employees filed, but once that secondary employment information has been verified or their previous unemployment has been looked into, that money has been coming through, and then they haven't had issues moving forward.
That's great. That's really helpful.
Okay. So this is just a sample, and I apologize, it's very tiny. And I told Ian that if any employers wanted any of this information separate, I'd be happy to make it available. But this is just an example of when we applied, that the email we received saying your application was received and that it was being reviewed. And then it just has some helpful information in there. So do know that when you do apply, unemployment or the Department of Job and Family Services does a good job of trying to give you as much information as they can to make sure to help you prepare for what's going to come once your application is received or approved. If you want to go to the next slide. And then this is what you will receive once your application is approved. It goes over what you need to do, your next steps in telling employees when to file their applications for unemployment. They essentially have a week to do that. That can be a little stressful, especially if they're having troubles online, if they don't remember their PIN, which I'll go over here shortly. If they've filed for unemployment before and have an 8-digit PIN that was previously established and can't remember it, that could be a little complicated. So that is something to keep in mind. But this is essentially the email you receive. It goes over what you're going to do as the week, and as I was explaining the weekly claims, you'll see at the bottom of this email when you have to file your first week. Employers cannot enter weekly information until that week's over. So it goes over all of that. And then it has the 3 attachments that also you can provide to your staff that will help them understand what they need to do. And we provided that in advance when we said we're going to launch this program. Who's willing to participate? We shared that information at the beginning as well because it's available on unemployment's website, and I'll show you those links. So you can provide that information at the beginning, and then again when when your application is accepted, just to reiterate what their responsibilities are as the employee. Next slide. Okay, so this is more of just my internal kind of helpful knowledge. What we learned. So consistency is key. If you, we set a timeline. We said, okay, we started the program at the beginning of June, and we said, listen, if you're going to sign up, you're participating June and July. Like, you're committing to a 2-month. Now, again, we knew the $600 is going to be coming in at that point on a weekly basis. So most of our employees were being made whole. So we knew for that 2 months we wouldn't have employees that said, okay, wait, I can't afford to do this, or this isn't working for me. Going forward, we are doing it on a monthly basis, and that's more for me on an administrative side, because I have to submit data on a weekly basis. And if every week I'm having to check with supervisors, okay, who furloughed, who didn't, and if I submit information wrong, then you have to get on the phone with unemployment, which is very difficult to do. So we are asking that employees sign up now going forward on a monthly basis, and they commit to that month. And then after that month, if they realize, okay, I can't afford to do this, or it's not working for me, then they can come off. It just makes it more consistent. And then, your data is correct. There's less room for error, human error, in my opinion. So we learned that consistency is key to make sure that the data being submitted weekly is accurate. Next slide. This, again, when I said this was our internal, so we said, as the City of Lakewood, these are our rules for participating. This is not a shared work or a swap things, but we required employees to take a minimum of 1 shift of unpaid time with no more than 20 hours per week, which that would be 50%. So according to SWAP, they couldn't do more than 20 hours. We didn't end up having anyone able to do that. We wouldn't have been able to deliver the services that our residents expect by having employees with that much time off, unfortunately. So most of our employees did take an 8-hour day. The initial program ran from June 1st through July 31st. And the only reason we allowed employees to participate like week to week within that month was to extend that 26-week period. But most employees didn't want to because they were receiving the $600. So they really did do it every week. The hours had to have been taken in a full shift. They had to make sure their managers understood the time off and that their managers were good with it. And then we didn't allow by employees participating for that to create overtime. Now, like if employees had meetings that were evening, like city council meetings, or if there was scheduled overtime, like getting the parks prepared for the pools, that was scheduled overtime. But we couldn't have employees taking a furlough day, not completing work, and then having to work additional hours. It defeated the purpose of the program altogether. So by participating, employees understood that their work still had to get completed, or it had to be something that would have to wait till their next scheduled day. Next slide. Patience. We learned that you need this in tenfold for this program to work. Their employees are going to have delays if they've had a previous unemployment or they have a second employer. It's natural. As I'm sure many of you know, it's not just a SWAP program. We have many employees who are being laid off or are unable to work. So unemployment's been inundated. And so, when I call, I am on hold often and for long periods of time, or I get through, but it says, we have a high call volume, please call back later. That happens. So we found that employees calling first thing in the morning, and I have the hours of operations for unemployment listed here on the slide. Calling first thing in the morning was very helpful. It seemed that wait times were much less, and you got a hold of someone a lot quicker. So I would recommend that if you participate and employees need to get through it all. There is a chat program on, and I will show that actually, I think it's on my next slide. You'll see there's a chat feature on unemployment's website that can be beneficial, but it's essentially, it's not a person, it seems to be a system, so they can only answer so many things. If someone did file for unemployment, what would they need? If they previously have filed, and this means 20 years ago or a year ago, it doesn't matter, they were assigned an 8-digit PIN number. If they don't remember that PIN, that can be a bit of a holdup. They can use the chat feature, or they can call the 866. I recommend trying the chat feature first. And if you do use the chat feature, it's going to ask you for information like your social, your date of birth, your driver's license number, and then the zip code. The important thing to remember is to use the zip code from when you filed for unemployment the last time. So if you've moved, you want to use that previous zip code. Also, if you were originally receiving correspondence via mail, so if this was 20 years ago, there's a good chance that probably was the case, as email was not as prevalent. So if you were receiving correspondence via mail, you will have a PIN mailed to you, which can take some time. So you may want to go ahead and just call and receive the PIN over the phone, and then also set your correspondence to be sent to you via email. Once you have your new PIN, you can sign back in and you can update your information then too. So that was just something we learned, is that 8-digit PIN is quite important. Again, this is just shows you that chat with, I highlighted it down in the lower right corner, the chat with a virtual assistant. If you do need to reset your PIN or you have basic questions, you can use that feature to help them get answered. And that's for employees and the employer. A few other just tidbits is the benefit taxable through the federal regulation. It is, so when you file for unemployment, it'll ask you if you want 10% taken out for tax purposes. It's up to the employees, the individuals, to do that. Just know if you don't have it taken out, then when you go to file, you will owe on that money that you receive. Ohio taxes are due on unemployment, and then I added that City of Lakewood does not. We don't tax on unemployment, so you would never owe anything locally for that money.
Hey, Claudia.
Yes.
I do have a question. So the income from unemployment is the unemployment benefits, not including the $600. That is considered taxable income. Is the $600 from the federal government, is that also included taxable income?
Yes. So, for example, I asked to have the 10% taken out. So the $600 I get weekly, I'm really only getting 540 of that each week.
Understood. Thank you.
Yeah. Other things to keep in mind, if you do offer medical benefits, you need to offer that at the same rate. You can't take that benefit away or require employees to pay more or anything like that of a premium. So make sure you continue to offer that. If you offer other benefits such as PTO, this is kind of at your discretion on how you want to offer that. To show a sign of good faith and to encourage employees to participate, we did not reduce that. Technically, we earn our time off based on hours worked. So if I'm working a reduced schedule, I shouldn't earn as much time off. We did not do that since we knew our employees were helping us by participating. So employees are continuing to earn PTO at their same rate. But again, that's based, you can decide that as an employer how you would like to do that. And then this, I just wanted to show that PDF, Ian, that I had sent to you as the communication we used.
We're going to get there right now, so bear with me for just one moment. I have to switch the view. Okay, go ahead.
Okay, so this is what we sent out to our employees, basically going over the rules of participating in SWAP through the City of Lakewood. So the first part was just a memo with the program details and the deadline for them to respond. Page 2 was the frequently asked questions that so SharedWork will provide FAQs from their point of view of common questions they receive for employees and participants. This was more from the City of Lakewood, what we knew would be common questions. So we had put something together. And again, this goes over kind of like what I talked about earlier on the bear with me, the taxable benefits. We had some questions on, our retirement benefits, how those would be affected. So we went into details. We're public employers, so we submit to PERS, not Social Security. So we had some information on that to share with employees, and then we had the hours of unemployment on there. And then page 3 was the form, basically saying, I am signing up for this program. I understand that, it's a voluntary and that these are the rules. And then we asked supervisors to sign off as well so that they understood who was participating and at what reduction of hours. So it was just a correspondence to make sure everybody was on the same page. So I just wanted to make sure you saw that, and I'm happy to make that available to you as well if it would be a nice template to work from. I'm sure many of you are much smaller employers than we are. We had 180 employees participate voluntarily for June and July, but I think, if we can manage it at that scale, I think small businesses could handle it as well. And, I'm happy to be a helping hand, or, any other questions that come up, I'm happy to answer. But that's the gist of the SharedWork Ohio program. We definitely have felt the benefit of it. Our employees, fortunately, with it being we've had great summer so far. Employees have actually enjoyed having some time off to kind of be with family or have some time to themselves among everything else going on in the world. So I think it's been beneficial in more ways than just saving some finances for the city. I think it has also provided some me time to the employees to relax and take care of themselves and put themselves first as well. So we've seen many benefits of it. These last few slides are just some helpful links. These go into SharedWork, some of the forms they have available. The second one down, that JFS 20142, that is the big brochure that goes over in much, much more detail than what I did on SharedWork and what it's about and step-by-steps. So that would be something to definitely peruse and look over. It also has screenshots of step-by-step on how employers apply, how employees register, all of those things. So it is very helpful. It goes over lingo, what wording, what certain words and definitions mean in the unemployment world. So that was helpful as well. And then the last page, I think, has just general, this is just general unemployment and a quick step-by-step guide for employees when they go to file for unemployment. So that is all I really have. I'm happy to answer any additional questions. Again, I think that as the employer and as an employee participating, I've seen the benefits on both ends. And I hope employers can consider this program and utilizing it for their staff.
Claudia, what would you say was the 2 most challenging things of dealing with educating your staff about SharedWork Ohio?
So we have we have an array of generations that work here. We have younger 20-year-olds who have only known technology their whole life, and we have those nearing retirement that may still own a flip phone and don't recognize technology. And because most of this is easiest done online to expedite the process, working with those employees that don't normally access a computer, I found that to be a bit challenging, walking them through the steps and helping them to understand how to file weekly claims. That, and then those employees who I don't feel like the process all that much was that difficult. I would say more of those employees who have their payments held up. And again, people talk, so it's like, oh, well, I got my payment, and then the employee next to them is like, well, I haven't been paid for 3 weeks yet. What's going on? And then fielding those questions and trying to, I probably handhold more than I should. I should probably say to those employees, you need to call unemployment, you need to figure it out, where I'm trying to resolve the problem. So I would say, getting a hold of unemployment can be challenging. Because this is specifically shared work, there is a SharedWork Ohio email address. I find that I don't receive answers very timely then either. So it's dealing with, well, the employees are like, where's my answer? And you're still waiting on answers. I think over time, the employees, again, when I go back to the patients, we've kind of learned to just roll with it. The claim has been approved. So we know you're going to get paid. It's just a matter of time. Some of our employees, the way to look at it is, well, you're going to get, with the $600, you're going to get a huge chunk, a nice little deposit into your account. But that was probably at the beginning. And then we did have a few employees that thought would be eligible. They ended up not being eligible. So how do you make that right? We asked you to start furloughing. Now you're not eligible for the unemployment. We actually went back and worked with those employees on trying to make them whole as well. So I would say a few of the kinks at the beginning. The beginning is the hard part. It's getting all of those little kinks worked out. But looking back 2 months into the program, I'm so glad that we did it. It was, the benefits definitely outweigh all of those little headaches we had at the beginning. So it has definitely been one of the better things we've done here. And, I think it's really brought us together too, because we have learned to work as a team more, because, when you have employees furloughing, but you have a job you need to get done, we have other employees who need to step up and kind of maybe go to a different department and help at a park or help pick up trash or help fill potholes. And it's really kind of unified us, I think, as an employer to say, we're going to pitch in. We know the work's got to get done. We have employees off. We got to work through it. So I think it's shown us, helped us learn a little bit about each other and us as an employer. And I've been really grateful to see that side of us. So.
Claudia, a question for you. What costs, or expenses, I should say, is the business responsible for when getting into the shared work program? Of course, we all pay into unemployment, but are there any expenses associated?
So if it was any other time, like if you were just participating at shared work non-COVID time, you would be responsible for 50% of the payment. But because the CARES Act, and you'll want to do, so when you apply, you're going to want to say, we're doing this to avoid layoffs due to the COVID. You want to put that tidbit in there. And from what I received from shared work is that the CARES Act will take care of 100% of shared work financing. So you as the employer should not be responsible for any of it.
And how far out will that go, or is that going to be determined by what is being discussed now in Congress? How far out will that 100% benefit last?
So it's my understanding that the CARES Act is set to expire, like the entire thing, like all of the programs, December 26th. Now, considering we thought we had everything under control, things, we're going to get a vaccine, COVID's going to slow down, and here we are, things seem to be ramping up across the country. I could see that being extended, but that's just me as an assumption. That's still, 4 months away. So I don't know, but at least through the end of this year.
And do you have any sense of the types of conversations that you'll have? I mean, it's coming up quickly here now at the end of the month. What would happen moving forward with keeping people on the program? Should the $600 not be renewed? Because as we said, there may be something less. There may be nothing coming. We're not really too sure, and hopefully we'll know soon. So any sense of kind of what's going to happen next, especially since we're talking about this now, middle to end of July, and I'm hoping that employers will be able to consider enrolling. That $600 change could maybe, alter people's mindsets about whether they want to pursue this or not.
Absolutely. So we did about 2 weeks ago ask employees if they were willing to consider if they would consider continuing in the program beyond July, knowing the $600 is set to expire. And we actually had a response rate of 90 employees. So about half of who originally participated is willing to continue to participate. And again, I think that goes back to, they're still accruing their time off at the full benefit rate. They have, some, I'm one of them. I have 2 little kids at home. I've kind of cherished having an additional day being with them. And because they're not in daycare, I think employees have appreciated, we've tried to be flexible. We try to create that long weekend situation for employees, not, mandate, oh, well, you got to take Wednesday. That doesn't work in every department, but in the ones it does, we've tried to make that work. So I think employees have really, yes, are they taking a pay cut? But I think a lot of them understand too that we're saving jobs. We have, some newer, younger employees who, maybe they are paying student loans, or they bought their first house, or they bought a car, and they know how devastating it would be for that employee to lose their job. And so they're really putting the whole up front instead of themselves as an individual. So I think they're seeing that big picture and taking one for the team, if you will, taking the sacrifice that puts a small dent in their pocket, knowing that they're saving a job of a fellow employee. So it's so 50% of our employees are continuing the program for the month of August. Again, maybe by mid-August they'll say, I can't do this in September. It's taking too much out of my pocket, and we fully understand that. And we've been fortunate to not have to mandate the layoffs or mandate furloughs. This has all been done on a voluntary basis. So we hope that we can continue to do that and not find ourselves in a different situation.
One final question, and then Allison, please feel free. What, if you could just maybe think about a type of scenario that a retailer or a restaurant, because there still are some retail stores in Lakewood that have not opened or are on limited hours, and restaurants, while they've reopened, they're only at so much capacity, or certain situations have arisen. So is there kind of a type of scenario where I own a business, I really should think about getting into this program because it's going to help my staff?
Yeah, I think of kind of that week to week scenario where, let's say you have an employee who typically works a Friday night. So if they work a Friday night, which, our weekends, I used to work in the restaurant industry. I've been a bartender, I've been a waitress. So I understand, the weekends, that's your high income shifts. So if you have someone who would typically work a Friday night, well, now you could say, well, this week we're going to have, let's say you have 10 employees. You say this Friday, these 10 employees are going to work their regular shift. These other 10 that aren't going to work are going to participate in shared work, and they're going to receive this percentage of income. So you can still keep them on the books, work them throughout the week, maybe other shifts. So I'm thinking more, if the employee's schedules allow for it, and maybe they have secondary employment, I don't know, but if their shifts allow for it, they can, work Monday, Wednesday, Friday, maybe the other staff work Tuesday, Thursday. Then you switch it the other week, or they take, they don't work a few of those shifts throughout the week. So they're getting, the shared work percentage, they're working Friday, and then the next week you kind of shift your employees the other schedule. So you still have employees that are working and getting their full income on maybe those busy nights, but then you're rotating them. So then on those other shifts that they're not working, or that Friday they're not working, they're still receiving a percentage of that. So that's kind of maybe a scenario I think of, or even same for, if you're a breakfast place, we have tons of breakfast places here, maybe that's that Saturday, Sunday morning shift. So you do a similar situation where, 1 week someone's getting those busy Saturday shifts, and then that next week they're not, but they're going to get a percentage for being in shared work for not working that shift. So I think you can get creative with it, and I think I hope employers will think about doing that.
That's really helpful. Thank you. Allison, anything you'd like to add?
No, I just want to say I think this is like the best kept secret around right now during COVID. So hopefully by, doing this, so thank you, Claudia, for your insight. I hope that people will look to take advantage of it because it really does seem flexible and will really help some businesses get over, some tougher times until we can get back to whatever our new normal is.
And I want to share too, for working in HR my entire career, I just learned about this in March as well, or, in May. Like, I didn't even know this program existed. So it's not, I don't want employers to think, how didn't I know? Or I mean, I spent my entire career in HR and I didn't know this program was out there. So it's something that has been like a kept secret for whatever reason. And I think that, I think it's something that employers, should definitely jump at the opportunity to take advantage of.
That's great. Thank you, Claudia. Thank you so much. You have so many things that you're working on at the City of Lakewood. To take the time to plan this out, to put together the presentation, and then spend the time with us today. We're grateful for it, and I hope this education will help other folks out in the community. So thank you again for all that you're doing. Keep up the great work. And it's been fun working with you for these first few months with your time here in Lakewood. So thank you.
You're welcome, and thank you for having me.
And to my colleague Allison, thank you as always for joining me on these calls and for helping out. So I appreciate your assistance as well. Okay,
my
team.
pleasure. Happy to participate.
So thanks, everyone. We will be back with you in the near future. We're working on what webinars are yet to come. If you have any ideas or things you are searching for information about and would like some help, please let us know. We're always happy to try to reach out to folks and experts like Claudia to put together presentations. And in the interim, any assistance you need, please give us a call, 216-521-0655, and just reach out to me and be happy to connect you. So everyone, thank you very much. Have a wonderful day, and we'll talk with you soon. Bye-bye.